James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting July the 8th, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. This week, I was thinking about decks and deck systems that I wanted to work with, and a couple of Lenormand decks presented themselves as viable options for the week. But at the very last moment, just as I was setting up the room to film the video, I had this overwhelming, urging, prompting, leading, being guided to work with Gypsy cards this week. So the deck that's going to be assisting me is the Retro Gypsy Cards. They are by Lynn Boyle, and I will be leaving information in the description box below so you can learn more about the deck, and if you fancy it, how you can acquire it for your own collection. So again, I'm working with the Retro Gypsy Cards by Lynn Boyle, and now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a closer look at the cards, because I'm really excited to see what's going to show up for this week's video reading. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I do every week for these general readings, I'm focusing on the intention of receiving the information, the insight, the guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial as we move through the upcoming week. Feeling one more time will be good. All right, and now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. I'm going to fan the cards out. And I'm continuing working with the pyramid spread because I realized that the Gypsy Cards is one of the systems that I haven't used with it yet. So I'm very excited to see how it works with the Gypsy Cards this week. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and because we're doing the pyramid spread, we need 6 cards. Here's card 6. So these are the cards that are going to be making up this week's reading. I'm going to take a moment to pick up the remainder of the deck and put that to one side. So now I'm going to count back. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's my check to make sure my counting is right. So now, as I always say at this part, if you're new here and this is the first time you're seeing the pyramid spread being conducted, this is how it gets played out. The first card at the top of the deck goes at the top. It forms the top of the pyramid. This card represents the issue or the central focus for the week ahead. Then cards 2 and 3, the next two, form the second tier of the pyramid, and they tell us more about the issue. They give us some more details about the issue, right? So I look at these as contributing factors to the issue. And then the last 3 cards form the bottom of the pyramid, and these can tell us ways in which the situation or the issue at hand, card 1, gets played out. So they could be read as a combination, or they may be, depending on what type of card they are, they may be 3 individual ways to approach the situation in terms of creating an outcome. So these are the cards, and I'm just taking a moment to just make sure they're lined up in the view. I'm a little fussy that way. All right. So now let's take a look at the first card. Remember, the first card is the issue card. So the issue for the week is, here we have letter. So letter is a card of communication. So this is asking us to consider focusing on the ways that we communicate with other people this week and the way that other people communicate with us. And I'm reminded of the fact that I believe that Mercury is going into retrograde as this video is being filmed. So we have to keep that in mind as well, because the letter card rules all types of communication, right? So this is just about being keeping an eye on phone calls, text messages, voicemail messages. This is also by emails. All forms of communication is ruled by this card. So it could just, again, where there's a need to focus on communication. So this could be where if we are receiving communications from other people that require a reply or a response, it may be two things. Number one, we need to be mindful of replying and responding in a timely manner, but also about being thoughtful in terms of how we respond. What are the words that we are using? Like maybe put some thought energy into the words that we are using it to best get our point across. Again, I'm saying that because of Mercury being retrograde. Now, another thing with this card is I'm looking at the image with the flamingo with paperwork in its beak. So this could just be also about paperwork and documentation. That would be another thing that we need to be mindful of with Mercury being in retrograde, right? So we need to be mindful of, letters, documentation, paperwork. I'm thinking like maybe contractual agreements, anything that may require a signature. So this could be the week where we need to be mindful of reading the fine print on agreements, making sure that we understand the terms of agreement. Those are the words that are coming into my head. So again, this card is just ruling all types of communication this week. So now let's take a look at the next two cards because they will give us maybe more insight or information about the letter card. So starting with the card on the left, okay. So here we have the money card. So on one regard, the communications this week may have to do with money, right? So there may be financial paperwork, financial documents, conversations or discussions around money that we need to attend to. Right? If it's not money in the literal sense, money can also be something of value. So it could just be that the communications this week are of value, meaning like they have some importance. Right? But my first impulse is to think of the actual literal sense of money and finances this week. Now, this card is also an abundance card. So it could just be saying too, like, there may be a wealth of, playing on the idea of abundance, communications that need our attention, right? And it could just be a matter of maybe prioritizing the conversations or the communications that have some sense of value, that have some sense of importance, right? But money in its literal sense can represent, things having to do with finances. But in the more metaphorical sense, it could just be what are we placing value on in terms of communications this week? Or is there a wealth of communications, conversations, discussions that need to be had? Or a wealth of communications that need response and responding to? So that is the money card. As I put it down, I'm going to pick it back up. As I put it down, I looked at the image and I looked at all forms of currency. So this could be, things having to do with the stock market or trading, or I'm thinking of like your money being converted because I'm thinking about like foreign currency. But I was also thinking about the word currency. So this could just be about keeping communications and conversations of all kinds current, right? So with that in mind, it's making me feel like, are we placing value on current conversations, current dialogues, current discussions? Or are we placing value on maybe something that's in the past? The idea of the money card is making me feel like there's a lot of value in staying current or keeping things current, which means like being in the present moment. So there's something about that. So there may be a seeing value about being in the present moment and maybe not drifting into the past or being so focused on the future. Right? So I'm seeing that. It's making me feel like there's a lot of wealth and richness about being present in the present moment. So I'm seeing that. All right, so now let's take a look at what's going on with the other card on the opposite side of money. And here we have, here we have the baby card. I love this image in this deck. So baby is a card that can represent something new, something beginning, or something starting. So here we have, with the combination of letter and money coming before this may be something new on a financial level, or something new in our financial lives this week, right? Because baby is a card, again, that represents the beginning of something, the start of something, something new, right? It could be a matter of somebody coming into new money, because it's making me think of, I'm using the French term, the nouveau riche, which is the new rich. So somebody may be coming into some money and maybe needing to have conversations or dealing with some paperwork or documentation around this new sense of wealth. Right? So there is that. It could also be, with the baby card, something having to do with an actual child, because the baby can represent a child or an infant. And so it could just be a matter of, something having to do with maybe the financial security of a child and needing to draw up paperwork or documentation, or making sure that a child's needs are being met monetarily this week, and we're needing to have some communication and conversation around that. Now, another aspect of this card for me, and I'm playing on the image with the baby in a bathtub, it could be like getting a fresh start or wiping the slate clean. So somebody may be doing something with their finances or around their finances that allows them a fresh start or wiping the slate clean. So with that in mind, and with the letter card as the focus, somebody may be doing something regarding their credit. That's what's coming to me in my mind. So somebody may be doing some, credit repair, or taking a look at something in their credit history that enables them to kind of start fresh or wipe the slate clean. So I'm seeing that around somebody's credit history. So again, baby can represent something new, the beginning of something, beginning stage, the start of something. It would be tied to money and finances, or that it has to do with a child or an infant in the literal sense, or that we are endeavoring to move in a new direction, a fresh start, or wiping the slate clean. And again, it may be tied to something having to do with money and finances. So I'm seeing that with the baby card. And so now let's take a look at the bottom tier. And remember, now the bottom tier can represent ways in which this situation could play itself out. So again, we had communication being the focus here, right? Communication in all forms. So this could be, again, phone calls, talking on the phone. This could be text messages, voicemail messages, emails, all forms of communication, even snail mail, but also to the possibility of paperwork and documentation. So let's take a look at the first card here in the bottom. And here we have the desire card. So here we have a card that talks about our needs, our wants, what it is that we desire. So this card is about anticipation and expectations. This is a card that I had a feeling might show up. So I was told or led to say that if this card did appear, that this is a card that talks about waiting for something. This card is about patience. So if we are talking about paperwork, documentation, something having to do with money, and maybe the beginning and start of something, there may be a waiting period that's connected to this, because this card again is about waiting and the need to be patient, right? So if you are undergoing a new process, or the beginning of something, or you're starting something, this card coming on the heels of baby is asking you to be patient, right? Now, if we're talking about money, then this card is about what is it that you need in terms of finances. What are your needs? And maybe we have to make the distinction between what our financial needs are and what we want financially, right? Because this card is making me feel like the idea of maybe for some people needing to make that distinction because it will help you maybe not be so impulsive when it comes to money. That's what I'm seeing in the moment, right? So it's about like, you know, when you are out and about and if you are shopping in any formal way, you may have to make the distinction between picking up an item that you need, that's a need, versus a want, right? And you may have to put off the item that you think you want, right? So again, I'm thinking like this is about our needs and our wants and what we desire and making a distinction, but also too something that we may be anticipating and expecting and that we may have to wait or be patient for. We may have to wait for it to arrive or wait to receive it. So I'm seeing that now. In the image, the woman is looking out of the window. So for some of us, it may be a need to change our view and our outlook on something, the way that we see it. Right? Again, that would play on the fact that she's looking out of a window. And as I'm saying the word window, it may be a window of time. And that would go back to the idea of waiting and patience, right? There may be a window of time before that thing that we need, want, or desire will actually show up and arrive. And as I put the card down, this card is known as a cause and effect card. So if I go up, the card that's behind it talks about what the cause is. So here we have a cause that has to do with money. Money is the source, or something of value is the source, or the cause for the anticipation, the expectation, the waiting, and the patience. Money is behind it, right? So I'm seeing that with that. Now, I already talked about this being a cause and effect card. Now, this card would also be something that may be talking about the cause or the source behind this need to be patient and to wait for something to arrive, that sense of anticipation. And with that in mind, the card in the middle is, okay. So here we have falseness, and falseness is a card for me that can represent something being wrong or some kind of mistake or something being off, right? So if we go with the idea here that if I put the card down and if the cause with desire being in front of falseness, if the cause is some kind of error, something being wrong, some kind of mistake, then maybe we're waiting on that to change or that to be corrected. And again, it may have to do with money. That whole idea that I talked about with maybe someone's credit history is being repeated here, right? Because here we have letter and falseness. They create a hidden dynamic here in this layout. I always connect these two cards. And here we have communication that is wrong, right? Communication of a mistake. You know, could be an error in some kind of paperwork or documentation, right? If this is paperwork and documentation, it may have an underlying mistake or error in it, right? And so again, that goes back to my opening statement about being mindful about communication and paperwork and documentation, because there may be some mistake being made in the paperwork or documentation, or that we have to be mindful of the words that we use. Right, and I'm going with the idea with the snake on the card, is that we don't want to use words that may be perceived as having venom in them, right? Right, so falseness for me is this idea about something being wrong, some kind of mistake that we need to attend to, right? And it may be through communication or paperwork or documentation, or it may be a mistake having to do with money and finances that we need to kind of clear up. And with that in mind, there may be a waiting period attached to it. And if we're talking about the idea about our view and our outlook, going with the idea that the woman is looking out the window. Remember, I said this is about a window, meaning our view or viewpoint on something or an outlook on something. It may be behind it, there may be some sense of false belief, something that maybe we believe to be true at some point, but it's no longer true. And as a result of that, we're needing to take a look at what do we believe now going forward. You know, how does this color our outlook or our perspective on something? Right? But my first thought is that there's something maybe wrong or some kind of mistake that needs to be attended to in terms of correcting it. And there may be something of a waiting period attached to it. Right? And once this gets cleared up, then that's maybe where baby comes in, because now we can move forward. We could start fresh, start new. You know, that sense of wiping the slate clean, right? So that is falseness. So now let's take a look at the final card, rounding things out. Okay, and here we have, okay, I know what to say about this card. So here we have malady. So malady, in the literal sense, can represent, you know, a down patch. We have here in the card, we have a woman who's lying in bed, and it looks like she may be under the weather, right? So on some level, this is about healing something and recovering from something. So if we go with the idea that the money card could be talking about something having to do with money and finances, then this card at the end is about, you know, I'm thinking like in terms of financial recovery, right? And if we put the card down, then here we have this idea of healing from some kind of mistake, right? If we go with the idea that falseness comes before this card, this is about a mistake that, you know, we're recovering from. Right? So with the woman in bed, this is a visual that says to me it's about putting an issue to rest or to bed, right? That common phrase or expression about putting an issue to rest or to bed. In another sense, keeping with the bed aspect, this card could talk about the idea about, you know, you've made your bed and now you have to lie in it. And with that, then this is about maybe the consequences of something being wrong or some kind of mistake or some kind of error. Like this is the kind of consequences that come as a result of that. Like on some level, you may have to come to some acceptance that, you know, you've got entangled in something, or something became complicated, or that this is the result of the consequences of some kind of wrong action. And there may be this idea of like either putting the issue to rest or to bed, or that you have to come to some kind of acceptance, meaning like you've made your bed and now you have to lie in it. But I'm going with the idea here that this is talking about healing from something and some kind of recovery process, right? And I'm looking at the figure. She has her hand to her head. And so this could be the idea of like it may be trying to work it out. The snake on this card would be something that may become a complicated process or some kind of entanglement, or it becomes really complex. And as a result of that, because you may be getting mired in the details, letter, if it's paperwork or documentation, getting mired in the details of it, that it can give you a headache. Because with her hand to her head, this is my headache card. I personally experience headaches and migraines. So for me, when I pull this card, sometimes it can represent a headache or a migraine in the literal sense. But I'm going to go with that being more metaphorical. Right? So again, it's making me feel like with baby coming before this card, there may be a beginning stage or some starting process of healing and recovering from what? Some kind of mistake or error. But we have to wait for the situation to play out, right? There may be a waiting period attached to that. So another aspect could be like there may be some sort of healing or recovery process we need to engage in for ourselves that has to do with maybe something that we believe to be true in the past. Again, with the idea about falseness, it could be about a false belief, and we're needing to recover from that. And if we do that, it helps change our view and our outlook on life. You know, again, with the woman on this card looking out of the window. So another aspect that's coming to me as I'm getting ready to wrap up here, if we go with the idea that This is not paperwork and documentation. I'm talking about letter and all forms of communication, and we are being mindful about the words that we are using. Be very careful about getting into a conflict. Here we have a snake and a cat on the card. So be very careful about, either spewing venom with our words or being catty with our words, right? Because we don't want to get into a situation in which we have to kind of recover that. We have to heal and recover from that. And that would mean, for me, I'm seeing the idea about going back to the person and having a follow-up conversation about the words that we chose to use. Because maybe in the moment, we felt justified for using those words, but upon reflection, sleeping on it, we realized maybe that wasn't the best way to approach the situation, or those weren't the right and best words to use in the moment. And so we've had some time to step away from that, to take a break, step away, get some rest, because that's another aspect of this card. It could be a timeout, a break, or a rest, and then we slept on it, and we see it differently now. So again, with malady being the outcome card, this could be about healing and recovering from issues or situations in which, we have had a sense of discomfort or a state of dis-ease, right? Maybe something that kept us from getting a good night's rest, right? But again, if there is a situation that's being corrected with malady, with the woman lying in bed and the woman here on desire looking out of the window, there may be a waiting period, something that's not going to be, it's making me feel like here it may be a situation that doesn't get resolved overnight. And on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's video reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.